Now, This Week in Texoma.
Welcome to the program. We're talking today with State Representative Ann Coody of Lawton, the Republican representing District 64. She is term limited, so she won't be running for re-election, and that may be a relief. We'll talk about that here a little bit later on in the program. But of course, at the state legislature, they've been having a big problem with the budget, so we thought it would be a good idea to get her in and give us an update on what's going on. It's great to have you back.
Thank
Appreciate you taking
it's
the time.
good to be back.
I know, like I mentioned in the introduction there, that you guys have had your hands full with this budget crisis. You've been there for a while.
Yes.
You've been through budget stuff like this before.
Yes.
But not to this degree. Give me some
Exactly.
comparative there. What is this like compared to the other stuff that you've had to deal with
Well,
up there?
this is the greatest shortfall that we've had ever, I guess.
Right.
And certainly since I've been there. $1.3 billion shortfall. And in a $7 billion budget, that's a big shortfall.
Right.
And so we're working very hard to do everything we can to make as whole as possible our agencies and all the services that we provide to the citizens of our state. We're considering a number of things in the House. Of course, as you know, there are three components of the decision makers in how that goes.
Sure.
The governor, of course, the Senate, and the House. And so the House has been working, members of the House have been working very hard under the leadership, of course, of the Speaker and of the Appropriations and Budget Chairman, Representative Earl Sears, to do everything we can do to find sources of money to make up for that shortfall, because we can't stand to give an across-the-board cut to the extent that we have a shortfall. So we're looking at a number of different areas to make up that shortfall.
And in comparison to previous years, there were some other monies that you were able to tap into, I think, in previous years that might not be as readily available as they have been in the past.
Yes, that's true. Not as much in the rainy day fund as we have had in the past shortfalls. Of course, the shortfalls that we have had in the past have not been as great.
Sure.
And frankly, we have had years when we had more money in the budget than our $7 billion budget.
Right.
And the funny thing about that is when we have an excess of money, we seem to have twice as many requests. But this is certainly the most difficult time that we've had.
And education, of course, is one of those, that is always one of that tries to take top priority. For those who don't know, Ms. Coody spent several years as an educator, teacher, and principal at MacArthur High School, and so those kind of things are near and dear to your heart.
Absolutely.
You lived it on that side, being in the classroom before. So I know it's one of those things that you really want to try to fix, but I guess on the legislative side, you see that the solutions aren't as simple as you would like for them to be, right?
Absolutely, they're not.
Yeah.
And when you're on the outside looking in, you can just fix it.
Right.
You just know how it ought to be fixed.
Right.
But certainly education is my priority, and I really believe it is the priority of most of the people who serve in the legislature, because these are our children.
Right.
And we want to do everything that we can for our children because they're our future.
Right. When you talk about some of the things that are out there, and you've mentioned the various components, the governor came out the other day with a proposal, a lot of bond money to try to get things going there. The initial reaction, I think, from a lot in the Senate was kind of, well, I'm not too sure about that. I think a lot of the House Republican leadership also weren't really too convinced of that as being a good idea. And again, it's just a proposal, and that's what she said at the time. My job is to throw some ideas out there to add to the mix. Give me your reaction to those ideas, and kind of, do you think there's any chance of any of those plans getting any traction among some of your colleagues there?
Well, I appreciate the fact that she's looking at several different areas. Personally, I would rather not borrow money.
Right.
But that is one location. We are looking at things like tax credits. We have looked at that for a long time. We've long realized that we need to evaluate the tax credits that we give. They're wonderful to bring business and industry into our state, and they should remain with those businesses and industry that is using their efforts to benefit the citizens of Oklahoma.
Right.
But where those tax credits are not benefiting citizens of Oklahoma,
Right.
we need to either reduce the tax credit or we need to take it away. And so we're really looking at some hard things that many people aren't going to want,
Right.
such as tax credits, such as perhaps some deductions.
Right.
We're also looking at perhaps some new taxes.
Right.
We're looking at the possibility of tobacco taxes
Right.
and alcohol taxes.
Right.
And
Yeah, a lot of things are on the table.
yes, they are.
And I guess that it was interesting because it was a month or so ago, and Representative Dennis Johnson, who represents District 50
Yes.
in Duncan and quite a bit of Stevens County, and he started talking about taxes, and I said, wait a minute, now you're a Republican, and you're talking about taxes. You guys are the ones who are wanting to come in and cut taxes all the time. And he said, well, you're right, but in this time, it is desperate measures, and then that kind of does, reflect where you guys are right now, where you are
Yes.
looking at things like sales tax on services, looking at internet tax,
Yes.
tobacco tax. Those are things that have been brought up. When we went to break, we were talking about a lot of things you guys were discussing: tax credits, tax cuts. I want to bring up the income tax cut. That's also another one that has been
Yes.
talked about, trying to
Yes.
roll that back. But before we get into some of those details about it, anybody who's a veteran watcher of the political process knows that every single year, whether you've got a budget crisis, whether you've got a surplus or whatever, it goes down to the very last minute. You guys are going to pass bills about X, Y, and Z, but the big elephant in the room keeps getting shoved into the corner until the last possible minute. And people, like you said, on the outside looking in say, fix it, do it faster.
Right.
I'm one of those ones who's wondering that. I'm saying, Representative
Right.
Coody, why didn't you guys get to this one faster? You knew this was a problem.
Yes.
Set me straight and tell me why it's not so simple to walk in and get that budget figured out by the middle of March.
Well, first of all, I'll have to tell you about an email that I received just this past week.
Okay.
From someone who said, I just do not understand why you can't do the budget first.
Right.
Why don't you get the budget done
Right.
and get that over with, and then you can worry about your bills or else go home or
Yes,
something.
yeah.
And I just chuckled at that because
Right.
there's so many things that enter into the budget. First of all, we have three different parts of the budget. We have the governor, we have the Senate, and we have the House.
Right.
And so we have to have the input from those three areas, plus the input that each of those three areas has from people who want to have that input.
Right.
And so we have to weigh all these ideas. We're working on it very, very hard, and we don't know, from one period of time to another, whether there might even be more money coming in.
Right.
And if so, we want to take advantage of that.
And that actually happened. I
Yes.
mean, if we've been watching the stories coming in, January revenues failed to meet projections, down by
Yes.
several percent.
Yes.
February failed to do that. March rolled around, though, and it actually met and exceeded the expectation. It was less than 1%, so it was basically a wash. But it was the first time in nearly a year
Yes.
that we hadn't had a budget year, a budget month, meet the
Right.
expectations. So that's
Right.
exactly an example of what is you're talking about, that you're encouraged that maybe if the April numbers come in,
Absolutely.
you might have a little more to deal with.
Yes, every time we have an estimate like that, it is encouraging to us. And I really appreciate a lot that I get emails and phone calls from people, from citizens
Sure.
who have ideas
Yeah.
about things that we can do.
Right.
And some of them are excellent, and we can incorporate that into our thinking. And so as we go on with that process, we pool our ideas, we talk about it constantly. We
Right.
have meetings nearly every day of the week among groups. The entire House of Representatives is invited to meet at 8 o'clock every Thursday, and I go to those meetings, 8 o'clock in the morning, of course, and we talk about ideas. And it is from those meetings that we get ideas from each other, and we're able to pool our ideas and talk about some of the things that we've mentioned in trying to decide where we're going to get the money
Right.
to come out of this. And we are going to come out of this. The chairman, as I mentioned a while ago, Earl Sears, tells me frequently, he says, Ann, we're going to do this.
Right.
We can do this. We
Right.
have sources, and we are going to do this.
Well, and on the flip side of it, you kind of have to.
Yes,
right?
we do.
I mean, the law won't let you borrow more money than you can spend.
Thank
so you
goodness.
guys have to have that figured out. And I guess the other thing, kind of what you're hinting at, is the other side of it is you do want to get it done quickly, but you don't want a bad budget to come out of haste, right? I mean, and those are the things that you kind of have to analyze all the way around.
We want to do it as quickly as possible, of course. For one thing, for every week that we do not stay in session, we save some money on expenses for legislators for staying up there, you know?
Right.
And so that helps. And the sooner we get it done, the sooner we're able to start working on the new budget.
Right.
And
whenever you mentioned before, why can't you do it first? Another thing that has been brought up in the past was having special sessions or legislative sessions that are only devoted to the budget.
Yes.
And that was talked about as, maybe every other year. One year you come in and do the budget, the next year you come in. I don't know, I've heard some pros and cons of that, and I've even seen this year as an example of why that's a bad idea, because if you come in every other year, you're doing a 2-year budget as opposed to a 1-year budget. What's your opinion on that?
Of course, I've never had any experience with a 2-year budget, but I know many states do that, you know. And it has
Texas,
some,
I think,
yes, they do. And it has some merit, but it does make it difficult to try to do a 2-year budget when, first of all, you don't really know how much you're going to have that next year.
Right, and especially since so much of our budget is based on energy revenue, and we've seen, and I talked to Representative Scooter Park at the beginning of the session, and he said, whenever we put those estimates together, we are forecasting, a low possibly or a high possibly, and so we do have a big range there that we're in, but nobody could have possibly predicted that the low would have been so much lower than the way the energy industry kind of turned out this year. So that's another one of those things that you can control what you can control, but some of that stuff just kind of happens to you, and you guys are left to have to deal with it.
I can foresee perhaps a special session to make up for what you made a mistake on. You know?
And there was even talk this year about, because of those shortfalls that we were asking people in the current fiscal year to make up, that we said, hey, maybe we need to go back and rethink this year's budget so you don't have to go across the board. I guess that has kind of evened itself out a little bit.
We were able to use the rainy day fund to help especially education, and also corrections because they were about to go broke.
The session gavels out, the last Friday or so of May?
We have to be out the last Friday of May by 5 o'clock.
Okay, so it feels like it's a long way away. I mean, where you say the end of May, but,
It doesn't feel like a long way off to me.
Yeah.
Because we have so much to do.
Right.
And every day there's so many things that we have to do, and I just feel this time creeping up on us.
Right.
The session has gone faster than, to me, faster
I was
than
going
any
to ask
session
about that.
yet.
And I think probably because everybody knows about the urgency of the crisis,
yes, right?
One of the things that was talked about early on, and I don't know if it's dead yet or whatever, but the income tax cut that kicked in because of some automatic revenues and just because of a quirk of the calendar, it kicked that in, and then right after that is when the bottom started falling out in the projections. The Democrats have really been on board with trying to roll that back. There had been, at least initially, some openness to that from members of the majority party. Tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there are a few who feel that way, but I feel very strongly that we need to keep as much money in the pockets of our citizens as possible. I believe that they could spend their money more wisely than we can. And I believe it's for the good of Oklahomans that we have that tax cut. I think it helps to build our economy. It helps to encourage both individuals and businesses to come to Oklahoma when taxes are low. States around us have no income tax. And sometimes I think, well, how wonderful that would be if we had no federal income tax and no state income tax. But We see how it does help states to grow in their economy, in their population,
Right.
and in their benefits for their people.
So even on a temporary basis, if somebody said, hey, let's roll it back, but let's only roll it back for a year or two, and then we'll let it reinstate itself, because that was something that also been popped up that said, let's just go ahead and
Yes.
try it that way, but you'd say, let's just leave it alone.
I really think we need to leave it as is. I really believe that much in letting people have their own money. I believe in small government. I do not believe that the government ought to tell me what to do, and I really feel very strongly about that individuals need to run their own lives. And I believe that it is a benefit to our state and to our economy to have that tax cut.
Let's talk about another proposal that was out there, or not a proposal, but it was connected to the budget, and this is regarding Medicaid. Oklahoma Healthcare Authority was talking about, how they're going to have to cut their reimbursements to provider networks, and we've done a handful of stories with Comanche County Memorial Hospital, over in Jackson County, same thing, Duncan Hospital, a lot of the smaller satellite hospitals.
Oh, yes.
Talk about that and kind of summarize the problem for people so they'll know kind of what is facing healthcare providers, nursing homes all over the place.
Absolutely, and I'm good friends with our healthcare providers and the people who come up to talk with us, about the seriousness of this situation.
Yeah.
Losing our hospital in Frederick is a tragedy, and other hospitals, other rural hospitals especially. Our people need those hospitals. Some of them, if they were seriously ill, couldn't make it to a hospital in another community. They need those hospitals. We need our doctors. We need our nursing homes. We need all of those areas of care for our people. And so I am very much concerned about the things that are going on. And as we are looking at ways to make our budget as whole as possible, well, it has to be whole. To make our budget whole, I should say, we're looking at ways that we can include health care to get what they need to have to make them whole.
And are there some options legislatively that, I think there have been a couple of plans to try to figure out a way to restructure the funding for Medicaid somehow, maybe patching into some federal funding. I don't know.
There's several ideas out there, and some of them don't involve that, some of them do.
Okay.
But there are several ideas out there to try to make healthcare whole.
Yeah, and that'll be something that you guys are still trying to work up until the very last day.
And I don't know what the answer will be, but I know that I will fight with all my might to make our healthcare system whole. And because if we don't have a good healthcare system, then we don't have a good life for our people.
Yeah, I know it's a panic button issue whenever you see
it is.
CEOs that have been in the healthcare industry for a long time, and you can just see the concern and the worry on their face, because I don't think we've ever been this close to a crisis where you're actually saying we may have to. Where are these people going to go if we're talking about nursing homes?
And so that can't happen. That can't happen. We have to provide for them. There's just no choice about it. Whatever we have to do, we have to do.
Well, that'll be something that I know we'll keep our eyes on over the remaining days of the session, and hopefully some solutions will come out. Let's talk about some of the other issues that were out there. We mentioned about your history as an educator. One of the bills that has gone through, and tell me where we are on this one, was to eliminate a lot of the testing. Parents out there who have kids in all the way through elementary school to high school know the dreaded testing weeks. This measure was going to try to wipe some of those end of instruction exams out. So explain to people what those tests are that are there and what are the ones that we're trying to get rid of possibly.
Yes. We are trying to get rid of as many of the EOIs as we can. Now, the federal government still requires us to give the English 2 EOI and the Algebra 1 and a science. And so we have to continue those. But we're trying to do away with as many as we possibly can, because it's just too overwhelming, especially 5th grade, where they have to take 5 tests. That's too many. So we're looking to see if we can divide that out over other grades rather than giving them all to those poor 5th graders.
Right. And you've had experience in the classroom before, and people are, that are like me, who went through those classes back in the 70s and 80s. I didn't have that many tests.
No,
And yet they were able to
no.
figure out mastery of subjects somehow.
Yes.
And I guess that's what most parents kind of grapple with is, where did we lose track of being able to determine if somebody was able to advance to the next grade, that now we have to have this testing metric in play? Can you?
Well, one thing is No Child Left Behind, and the establishment of the National Department of Education. You know, we haven't always had that.
Right.
But when we started that, and then when we had No Child Left Behind, there were so many expectations. Well, now we don't have No Child Left Behind. We
Yeah,
been
that's
freed
expired.
from
And
that.
right,
That's
yeah.
right. We do have a new program called ESSA, which is every, I can't remember what it stands
Some
for
kind of
now, but
acronym there
it's
that
an
says, here's what-
acronym that says every student succeeds.
Right.
In fact, it's the Every Student Succeeds Act.
There you go.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so that enables us to make our decisions here at the
Right.
state
And I think
level.
and I think that's what has been at the driving force behind a lot of it, is that people have slowly felt more federal government overreach rather than allowing each individual school district to kind of carve out what they believe is right. You know, let the
Yes.
professional educators make those calls
Yes.
rather than somebody who's a bureaucrat
Exactly.
a couple thousand miles
Exactly.
away.
So I recently went to a national conference of state legislators, and we discussed this and learned about that act, Every Student Succeeds. And I was thrilled to see what they're doing with that, because it does give the responsibility to the states instead of placing it at the national level.
And as far as those EOIs going away, where does that legislation sit right now?
Well, you know, we're still working on that.
Okay.
We have a testing committee
Okay.
that meets a couple of times weekly to
Okay.
decide, because we all have different ideas,
Right.
to tell you the truth. And of course, the State Department of Education is involved in that as
Yes.
well, those professional educators.
Right, right.
And personally, I feel that our trained educators who have been educators all of their lives
Right.
and are doing it because they feel led to do that are probably much more qualified than those of us who are legislators. So I think that we need to listen to them and pay a great deal of attention to that.
Well, that's something we'll keep our eye on over the remaining couple of weeks of the session as well. We only got a couple of minutes left. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you're term limited out.
Yes.
So take me back to whenever somebody said, Ms. Coody, you ought to run for the legislature.
Yes.
And now here you are to the end of the time. I want to
Yes.
see how what you experienced over these past 12 years measured up to what your expectation was whenever you decided to run.
Well, I believe that it has more than measured up to my expectation. I never dreamed that I would love it as much as I do. I really, really enjoy it. It is exhausting. We work very, very hard. The work is never done, but it is so satisfying. Of course, sometimes it's disappointing too.
Sure.
But it's very satisfying to have the opportunity to try to put in place suggestions and ideas that citizens have, because that's where we get most of our ideas for bills, is from citizens.
Right.
Especially in my case, where I'm an educator, and so many educators talk to me about
Sure.
bills that they'd like to see in place, and I try to put those forth, and sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not, but
Right.
I just thoroughly enjoy doing this, and I'm a little sad that I'm going to have to leave. But there are many excellent educators there now, I mean, excellent representatives there now, with whom I have made very good friends, and one of whom I'm related to.
Right.
And so I plan to share ideas
Right.
that others give me and ideas that I have, to see if we can't still put forth some things that will help education and other areas
Well,
of
and
Oklahoma
I'm
life.
glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that just because you're not going to be in the Capitol anymore doesn't mean you still won't have your nose in the Capitol's business.
I will.
To make sure that they can stay straight, even though you're not going to be patrolling the halls anymore. Ms. Coody, we appreciate you taking
Thank
the time.
you so much.
We do appreciate your service at the Capitol as
Thank
well.
you.
Good luck to you in the future.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching, folks. We'll see you next time.
If you have a topic or issue you'd like us to focus on, please write to the address on your screen or fax us at 357-3811. Or you can email us.